This video will show you how to remove and install a trim tilt motor on a Yamaha 90 horsepower 2-stroke outboard. Many other models will follow the same procedures. First item is to raise the motor up and set the service lock. If your motor is not currently working, you can relieve the hydraulic pressure by turning that slotted valve inside that hole in the direction of the arrow. It will be located on either the right or left mounting bracket for the outboard. The reason I'm replacing this motor is due to a lot of rust corrosion on the outside of the motor that I replaced last year. There are 2 bolts on either side, 14mm bolts that need to be removed, and then I will show you a 3rd bolt on either side that has to be loosened up so that we can tilt the trim tilt unit as far down as we possibly can without removing the outboard from the boat. Again, there are 2 bolts, 2 on the left, 2 on the right, that need to be removed. These help to hold the trim tilt unit in place in between the mounting brackets for the outboard. Next, I'll remove the C-clip or circlip that holds the upper pivot pin for the tilt piston in place. Now is as good a time as any to remove that. You're going to have to take some of the pressure off of the pin in order to push it back through. So I lift up the lower unit and pull it on out. Now it's time to loosen, do not remove, just loosen this 3rd 14mm bolt on either side. Once this is loosened, the power trim unit will have some movement to it. Okay, now it's time to remove the 3 10mm bolts that hold the trim motor in place. These 3 bolts are not equidistant from each other. Take a look at the replacement motor as to how they are positioned, because it will only go in one direction. To remove these bolts, I use a 1/4 inch drive 10mm deep socket and a 4 inch flexible 1/4 inch drive extension. The rearmost and starboard bolts are fairly easy. It's this 3rd bolt which is the aggravation. To do this job, you're going to need a lot of patience, first in getting the bolt out, and more importantly, getting it back in with the replacement unit. It can be done, as you will see, but it takes a lot of patience. If you get frustrated, walk away from it, come back. Don't drink anything, because you'll need a clear mind. It also helps to have thin fingers. I don't know that I could do this if I had fat fingers, but it is possible to be done. The 3rd bolt is finally removed, and the trim tilt motor is taken out. It is still connected by the leads, which we will now remove. Observe how the electrical leads are routed through the mounting bracket, the wire holder there, up through the grommet in the bottom of the lower cowling, underneath the motor but behind the carburetors, along the side, and up to the solenoid. There's lugs underneath this black protective. The cover is held in place with 2 Phillips head screws. Remove the screws and the cover to gain access to the mounting lugs for the wire leads for the motor. You'll see that the leads are green and blue, and they are attached to color-coded studs, green and blue. Those nuts are 10mm nuts. Remove them and remove the wire leads to the motor. I was expecting rain, so I put the washer and nuts back on the studs in case I had to button it up. One thing I'm going to strongly suggest to you is that after you get these 2 ring connectors off of the studs, that you attach some twine or monofilament to the ring connectors, so that when you pull this wire back through underneath the motor to the other side and back out, you will have a pull line which you can use to fish the new motor's wires back through in the same location. I did not do that. It would have been a much easier job if I had. Now it's just a matter of fishing the cable back through the grommet. Might have to push and pull from either side. Back through the retainer, through the mounting bracket. Now the motor is free. You can see the corrosion that had developed on this one. Okay, here's what it looks like where the motor was removed. You'll see the O-ring that came off the motor. We'll have to put a new one on the new motor. A spring that sits in there, I'm not sure what its purpose is, and a nylon adapter which must be oriented to the same direction as the drive pin that will be sticking out of the new replacement motor. You must align those or else the motor will not sit proper. As we're looking at this motor being put in place, I must tell you that I forgot to show you the O-ring being put on the motor, the base of the motor. There's a part of the motor that extends about 3/16 below the mounting base, and the O-ring goes around that part that extends. It will have a tendency to try to roll off. You'll need to be careful that it stays in place before you start to position the motor on the power trim unit. I cut out about 45 minutes of video of aggravation of me trying to get this rear screw started. I did find that the easiest way to do this was to put the screw in the hole on the trim tilt motor, put the socket over the bolt, and then maneuver all 3 into place. And once you have the bolt in position, go ahead and start tightening it down. You can check your alignment by looking at the other 2 holes on the trim tilt motor. I'm going to caution you to make sure that you do not strip or cross thread any of these bolts as you're putting them in. I do not know what the torque specifications were, I just snugged them down, but be real sure that you do not cross thread any of these bolts. Now that the motor is securely mounted, it's time to route the wires. Sorry for blocking the camera angle. You do not want these wires pulled real tight. You want to make sure that there is some looseness to them. Out the side of the bracket, through the retainer, and up through the grommet. Again, hopefully you have taken my advice and you have a pull string there that you would then reattach to those ring terminals, and once you push them up through the grommet, you'll be able to use that pull line to pull them underneath the parts inside there, the engine, and get them over to the right side of the motor. If you had taken my advice and attached the pull line to those ring terminals, it would have made this job much easier, much quicker. And once you have the leads pulled through, feed them down into the cowling, making sure they're not binding on any linkages. Make sure they're out of the way, and then attach the appropriate colored wire to the correct lug. Reattach the protective cover. Using a wire brush, I cleaned the threads of the 4 14mm bolts that we removed from the outboard's mounting brackets that hold the unit in place, the trim tilt unit. After cleaning the threads, I put some anti-seize compound on them. Place the bolts into the holes. On either side, and then loosened up the relief valve so I'd be able to manually tilt the motor. It is extremely important to make sure that the screwdriver you're using is an appropriate match for the head of the relief valve stem. You do not want to mess that stem head up. By jiggling the lower unit, I'm able to get the trim tilt unit to move in place so that I can get the 4 bolts that were removed started. Go ahead and tighten them up. Then tighten the remaining 14mm bolt on either side which you had loosened but not removed. I failed to mention earlier that I used a 14mm box end wrench for that task. At some point I had placed that pin back through the tilt piston. I don't remember when, but it's then time to reattach the C-clip or circle clip so that pin remains secured. Okay, the trim tilt motor is installed, the leads are hooked up. It's time to fill and bleed the hydraulics. To do this, you need the transom in as near vertical or slightly top forward position so you can get as much fluid in your reservoir as you possibly can. I apologize for this camera angle here. You're going to see a better picture of it now. I have a small funnel with a plastic tube fitted over the bottom of the funnel. Put the tube into the hole that the plug came out of and fill the reservoir as much as you can with Mercron 3 transmission fluid or the recommended lube that Yamaha sells. Fill it until it starts running out. Then, as quickly as you can and carefully as you can, remove the tube, reinsert the plug. Tighten the plug just a little bit snug, don't over tighten it. Now that the reservoir is full, you need to release the pressure relief valve. The way that the system is bled, you fill the reservoir, release the pressure relief valve, lower the motor all the way down the outboard. Once it's all the way down, you tighten the relief valve or close it, and then use the trim tilt motor to raise the outboard. Now the outboard's all the way down. I didn't show my tightening the relief valve. You have to do that or else the motor will not operate the trim. Use the electric motor to raise the outboard. I'm having a little bit of a problem with the switch there. Raise it all the way up, past the trim, full tilt, come back around, open the plug, refill the reservoir again. I only filled the reservoir twice during this replacement of the motor. Yamaha may recommend that you do this 3 times, I'm not sure. But I felt that I had gotten all the air out of the system. Tidy up your area. Clean any spilled transmission fluid. There will be some. Now you're done on the back side. Double check everything. working beautifully. I hope this video proves helpful to somebody, gives them the confidence to do the job. It took me a little over 2.5 hours, which includes all the camera angles setting up for it. It's easy to do, just need patience. Thank you for watching, and if you like it, give me a thumbs up.